1.1.4 The Shared Responsibility Model. Who handles what? Cloud systems work because responsibility moves to the right owner, not because responsibility disappears. The simplest way to think about this is the provider takes care of the physical foundation, and you take care of the architecture on top of it. This isn't philosophy. It's a survival lesson the industry learned through real pain. Let's walk through what that pain looked like. Before the cloud, companies paid what we might call the physics tax. Netflix is a perfect example. Back in 2008, they suffered a major outage because of a regional power failure. Nothing was wrong with their software. The physical infrastructure failed. Millions of users stared at spinning wheels because a transformer field literally overheated and melted. Netflix engineers weren't discussing resiliency patterns. They were thinking about generator fuel levels. Fast forward to today. Netflix doesn't manage power grids. They manage architectural resilience, chaos experiments, automated failovers, and controlling blast radius. That's shared responsibility in practice. Capital One followed a similar arc. They didn't adopt the cloud because it was trendy. They adopted it because owning hardware meant auditing badge access and door locks. At some point, they realized, we don't want to audit doors. We want to audit encryption policies. That is responsibility placed at the meaningful layer. Shopify tells the scaling version of the story. On-prem, they ran spreadsheets, trying to predict holiday load. In the cloud, the guessing stopped. They could rely on auto-scaling and regional failover strategies. Responsibility shifted from rack planning to architectural behavior. GitHub illustrates reliability. They once suffered outages tied to local power problems in San Francisco. With distributed cloud replication, redundancy became an architectural responsibility, not the electrician's night shift. LinkedIn ran into capacity limits around 2010. User growth outpaced the rate at which new rack space could be provisioned. They weren't limited by programming ability. They were limited by forklift speed. Dropbox gives a nuanced twist. They didn't move workloads to a public cloud. They built their own internal one. But shared responsibility didn't disappear. Dropbox engineers focus on durability policies, not literal water leaks in server rooms. Then there's Knight Capital, a story everyone should know but few mention. They lost $440 million in 45 minutes due to a deployment logic failure. There was no hardware outage. It was unclear who owned which level of responsibility. That's shared responsibility done wrong. The Maersk ransomware disaster teaches another angle. Thousands of machines went down because data centers behave like isolated islands. Cloud wouldn't have prevented the vulnerability itself, but shared responsibility would have prevented the catastrophic blast radius. Uber today uses multiple cloud providers. Not out of fear, but because they explicitly separate which responsibilities belong to which platform and which responsibilities stay in-house. So no, this isn't outsourcing. This is specialization. And specialization leads to a pattern. The cloud provider understands the physical world. Data center fire suppression, fiber redundancy, diesel reserves, cooling tolerances, power distribution, and cross-rack airflow. But the cloud provider doesn't know your application's world. Your compliance zones, your encryption policies, your acceptable downtime, your identity model, your audit requirements, your retention policies. Because of that difference in context, shared responsibility is not they handle everything. It is everyone handles what they have the context for. Now let's translate this into interview-ready language. A senior engineer might say it like this. Cloud providers secure and operate the infrastructure. Customers secure and configure workloads on top of that infrastructure. The division exists because architectural decisions depend on application and business context, not hardware context. Netflix doesn't want AWS deciding failover logic. Capital One doesn't want AWS deciding encryption rules. Context determines responsibility. That answer doesn't just show knowledge. It shows judgment, and judgment is what interviewers listen for. With that understanding in place, we're ready to take the next step. We now know who handles what. Next, we look at how cloud capabilities are exposed as actual services. Not as buzzwords, but as architectural building blocks. Infrastructure as a service to platform as a service and software as a service. When we see those layers clearly, cloud architecture stops being a mystery and becomes a toolkit. End of section 1.1.4.